All right. Continuing on. I think we left off last time about in chapter 8, about verse 6. And we're going progressively through the end time events. We went through the opening of the book, the opening of the seals. We talked about the progression, the first seal being the coming of the Antichrist, the second seal being war, the third seal being the famine, fourth seal being the death, the fifth seal being the martyrs, sixth seal, the terror that comes about. Then in chapter 7 we had this interlude, or this pause, if you will, where we were introduced to, among other things, the 144,000 who were the remnant of Israel. And those are the ones who received the seal. We will hear more about them later on. And then with when the seventh seal is opened, that brings about the sounding of the trumpets, and there will be more judgments, more bad news, if you will, that comes about as these trumpets are sounded. So let's try to work our way through the sounding of the trumpets and see what we can make out of this mystery revealed. All right, where did we leave off last time with our reading? Let's see.
Right here.
Right around there?
Yeah. Sarah and...
Okay. Sarah, would you mind reading for us chapter 8?
Which chapter?
Chapter 8, verse 6, if you don't mind. Chapter 8, verse 6.
Then the seven angels who had the seven trumpets prepared to sound them. The first angel sounded his trumpet, and there came hail fire mixed with blood, and it was hurled down upon the earth. A third of the earth was burned up, a third of the trees were burned up, and all green grass was burned up. Pause
right there. So if there's any good news about this time of tribulation, it means that there will be no need for grass mowing, right, Tommy? All the grass is burned up. But what does that sound like? Chapter 8, verse 7. Hail and fire mixed with blood, and they were thrown down to the earth.
Well, it's just hard to believe.
Hard to believe?
It's hard to,
It's hard to imagine.
Hard to imagine. That's the word.
I think you believe it, it's just hard to try to visualize what it is.
Yeah, 8, 9, and 10, that's just,
There's some difficult stuff there.
Yeah.
It's going to be, as Jesus said, it's a tough time. It's a time of tribulation.
Yeah.
Well, wouldn't be called tribulation if it was fun.
There's, I don't know if it's because of Facebook or whatever, there's a lot of things showing up that are going on in the sky. One of them, these people, it was at night on the East Coast, and whoever was talking about it, they were cussing and everything else. But the last one I saw, out of Arizona or somewhere, and it's the strangest looking, it's clouds, looked like a pencil, and it punched through a cloud.
Yeah.
And they had one going up, they never met, so when I see it, I think it's, it's signs.
Signs in the sky, could be.
In the sky,
Well, that's why it's important for us to know what the Scripture says here, because there's going to be a lot of misleading things happening. The Antichrist is going to do a lot of things to try to mislead and deceive people. That's why, even if we can't understand this stuff, and I'll tell you, much of this stuff is very difficult, as Tommy says, to understand or to visualize, but at least we need to know what it says, what's going to happen. And one of the things that we see here in verse 7 is that we have the hail and fire mixed with blood that's thrown down to the earth. Again, not unlike what happened during the time of the plagues, and that God sent down when he sent Moses to deliver the children of Israel. So this is not something that had happened before. Yes.
So this is going to be nothing like we've seen before, like man has done. This isn't going to be like volcanoes or anything. This is going to be something just totally different, right?
I think it's going to be different in that it is going to affect a lot more, because it said that maybe the whole world will not be affected. Some say that the reference to a third of the world, or some say a fourth of the world, is referring that the first place that's going to happen is in the Middle East. Okay, and that this is going to happen in the area of Israel and the Euphrates and those areas, northern Africa perhaps. Some say that what's being spoken of here is the area that was circumscribed by the old Roman Empire. I don't know, but what we do know is that it is going to affect a significant portion of the earth.
Okay, well, later on, it talks about in the city of Sodom and Egypt, where Christ was crucified. What is that?
We'll talk about that,
But that's not this part?
Jerusalem is referred to as Sodom and Egypt. That's actually Jerusalem's being referred to there, not those areas. We'll talk about that later on. But anyway, yeah, as Tom said, this is going to be hard. It's hard to imagine when this kind of stuff starts happening, but we're going to know it. Yes, sir.
You know, when you read and you look at it, and you know, man used to think the world was flat.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, when you start, and he says the angel is coming from the east and this and it's going to roll it, sounds like to me the world has done been laid out flat.
Yeah, there's going to be significant changes here, that's for sure. All right, read on, Sarah. Verse 8.
The second angel sounded his trumpet, and something like a huge mountain, all ablaze, was thrown into the sea. A third of the sea turned to blood. A third of the living creatures of the sea died, and a third of the ships were destroyed.
Pause right there just a second. What does that sound like to you?
I like to be followed.
And something like a great mountain burning with fire was thrown into the sea.
Volcano.
It didn't come up.
Could be.
It was thrown.
Well, I don't know if it was thrown, but there are volcanoes under the sea.
Yeah.
That's how Hawaii was formed.
Some of these things sound like natural disasters, and if we read on, some of them sound like things that are coming from, from outer space, like a meteorite or an asteroid. You read in these science journals that many times it's not told to us, but many times there are large meteorites, sometimes large asteroids that come very close to Earth. And if that happens, one of those happened to, and they have hit the Earth before. There are huge craters at various places around the world where much smaller ones have hit and caused, tremendous disasters. In fact, it's surmised by some that the reason that one of the things that caused dinosaurs to become extinct is a huge meteorite hit and caused a big cloud of dust to rise up that blocked the sun and cooled the Earth, and that somehow that extinguished certain types of life. Whether that's true or not, we don't know, but there are things going on around us that are difficult to predict. All right, verse 10, is that where we left off?
When God lifts his protection,
Oh, yeah.
those meteorites can really come.
Yeah. It seems that's an excellent point. It seems highly improbable that we on Earth would not be struck by everything that the moon has been struck with. You look at the moon, and what do you see? You see just crater after crater after crater after crater, like the whole surface of the moon is covered with craters. How is it that the Earth, particularly in modern history, has been able to avoid that kind of strikes like the moon has? As you say, God's protection. When he removes his protection, I think we're a much bigger target than the moon. All right, read on. Verse 10.
The third angel sounded his trumpet, and a great star, blazing like a torch, fell from the sky, and a third of the rivers on its springs of water. The name of the star was wormwood. A third of the waters turned bitter, and many of the people died from the waters that had become bitter.
Pause right there. Nobody really knows what these meteorites or asteroids are composed of, but they could be composed of something that's highly poisonous to us. And if something like that would strike the sea or the rivers or whatever else, it could cause serious damage just by unleashing whatever they're comprised of.
Well, the federal government is, they're trying to control all water now,
Yeah.
even ponds.
Yeah. Good luck when that happens.
No, they're trying to right now.
Right.
Any water would be under federal control. Even streams that don't have water, like in Texas, you see it said bump, and it was for water to run through it when it came down. They even want to control those.
Well, all right, read on, verse 12.
The fourth angel sounded his trumpet, and a third of the sun was struck, a third of the moon, a third of the stars, so that a third of them turned dark. A third of the day was without light, and also a third of the night. As I watched, I heard an eagle that was flying in midair call in a loud voice, "Woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth, because of the trumpet blast about to be sounded by the other three angels."
Things are bad and getting worse. What do you make of that verse 12? And the fourth angel sounded, and a third of the sun, and a third of the moon, and a third of the stars were smitten, so that the third of them might be darkened, and the day may not shine.
It almost seems like it's related back to 10, where the great star,
Yeah.
and it knocks the earth out of orbit, so all at once, what we've known as time and cycles and stuff is all out of kilter.
Oh, I hadn't thought about that, but yeah. I was thinking it could have been if this huge volcano blew or an asteroid or something hit the earth, it could create such a cloud of dust that you wouldn't be able to see up there. But that's not beyond the realm of possibilities
Ways
too.
God could accomplish.
And I've heard of scientific scenarios about some huge asteroid or other heavenly body hitting the earth and actually knocking it off its axis that would affect, as you say,
Well,
the
this
cycles.
one scientist, he looks at the sun all the time, that's what he studies, and he said it's a big hunk of the sun is already missing. They have real recent, wherever it went, when they have these solar flares, he has some kind of equipment that looks constantly at the sun. So,
I know where it went. It came to Louisiana.
A piece of it fell on us yesterday, huh?
Well, in Lindsay's scenario, it would be something we've never seen before. In your scenario, it would be something that we had seen before. That's what I'm trying to figure.
Well, again, we don't know. I mean, and here's John living 2,000 years ago. All this stuff is revealed to him. He's trying to explain as best he can with his human mind of 2,000 years ago what's going on, and he's having difficulty explaining it. And I'm not sure that if any of us saw it as John did, that we'd be able to explain it any better. I don't know. So
Would it be like we're gonna be in more darkness than light?
Yeah, that's what
Yeah.
it sounds like.
it really sounds like.
everybody's moving to the light.
Spiritual and physical.
Yeah.
But, that's consistent
Yes.
with the scripture of,
Yeah.
God is light and
Mhm.
the darkness in the world is.
Yeah. And we're gonna be getting the physical darkness that we deserve because we're
Well, I
spiritually
got a
dark.
note here that Wormwood going back is associated with the constellation Scorpio.
Uh-huh.
In about a month, we're gonna be under the Scorpion constellation.
Hmm.
And I noticed that Day of Judgment is 9/23, so that's like 30 days.
Yeah. Look, there's a lot of things.
Just FYI.
There's also going to be the fourth blood moon of the season that comes sometime at the end of September and early October too. So there's just a lot of things that are coming around. Yeah. All right, chapter 9. Terry, would you read that for us?
The fifth angel sounded his trumpet, and I saw a star that had fallen from the sky to the earth. The star was given the key to the shaft of the abyss.
Pause right there. The fifth angel sounded, and I saw a star from heaven which had fallen to the earth, and the key to the bottomless pit was given to, not to it, but to him. What is this star that had fallen to earth?
Same.
Probably, well, mine's footnote says this is a divine agent, probably an angel.
That's what I have.
Well, some say, and I made myself a reference to Luke 10:18. Luke 10:18 says, and this is Jesus, he says, and Jesus said to them, I was watching Satan fall from heaven like lightning.
But
So,
when?
huh?
But when?
Well, this could be, something that Jesus is revealing about the future. But one of the things my diagnosis is that this is Satan. And you say, well, what is Satan doing in heaven?
Well, he started there.
He did.
And if you go back to Job, it even predated Job. when
Yeah.
Satan came.
Everybody thinks, or most of the world thinks, that old Satan is living in hell now. No, Satan's not living in hell. As Lindsay said, what does Job say the realm of Satan is?
Earth.
He's walking around on the earth, and he even goes up to a council in heaven with God. He sits around the meeting table with God, and he discusses with God and the angels what's going on down on earth. So Satan doesn't want to be in hell any more than anybody else does. And so I believe this is Satan being cast down to earth, and this star is referred to not as it, but as him. So it's a personality. So it's either Satan himself or one of Satan's powerful angels. Read on, Terry, verse 2.
When he opened the abyss, smoke rose from it like the smoke from a gigantic furnace. The sun and the sky were darkened by the smoke from the abyss. And out of the smoke, locusts came upon the earth and were given power like that of the scorpions of the earth. They were told not to harm the grass of the earth or any plant or tree, but only those people who did not have the seal of God on their forehead.
Pause right there. Who has the seal of God on their foreheads? 144,000 referred to. So the 144,000 are still on the earth. They're going to be going through the tribulation, but one of the things that they get a pass on is all the grief that's going to be dealt by these scorpions that are released. All right, read on. Or these locust-type scorpions.
They were not given power to kill them, but only to torture them for 5 months. And the agony they suffered was like that of the sting of a scorpion when it strikes a man. During those days, men will seek death, but will not find it. They will long to die, but death will elude them.
Those would be some bad days. Now read about the appearance of these locusts.
The locusts looked like horses prepared for battle. On their heads they wore something like crowns of gold, and their faces resembled human faces. Their hair was like a woman's hair. Their teeth were like lions' teeth. They had breastplates like breastplates of iron, and the sound of their wings was like the thundering of many horses and chariots rushing into battle. They had tails and stings like scorpions in their tails that had power to torment people for 5 months. They had as king over them the angel of the abyss, whose name is in the Hebrew is Abaddon, and in Greek, Apollyon. The first woe is past. 2 other woes are yet to come.
Pause right there. These are some bad sounding creatures. You know, when I read the description of these things, or when you read the description, what comes to your mind?
The alien.
Alien?
But did you notice it said 5 months?
Yeah.
We're not given a time frame on a lot of this.
That's right.
This is,
Specific 5 months.
Torture.
And it says, the sound of their wings was like the sound of chariots and of horses rushing to battle. I remember watching a movie about the Vietnam War, about these helicopters that came in with their wings. What do the wings of a helicopter sound like? To me, these things sound like some sort of supernatural helicopters with whatever. Some say that what is referred to here are demon spirits that you may or may not be able to see, but that will torment mankind. Some say that they are physical things. You know, whatever they are, they're awful. As Lynn said, they're going to torment people. They're not going to kill those who are here, but they're going to torment people so much that people are just going to long to die, but death is going to elude them.
Are they going to torture only the 144,000, or are they going to torture everybody?
They're going to torture everybody, but the 144,000 it says in verse 4 says, and they were told that they should not hurt the grass of the earth nor the green thing, but only the men who do not have the seal of God on their foreheads.
Okay, so they're not going to be
So the
stoned.
144,000, they're here.
That's God's elect.
That's right. That's His elect, and for some reason they're going to be witnessing this tribulation and the torment of it, but they're not going to be victimized by these creatures.
I thought the grass was already burned up.
See, that's what I thought
Only a
too.
third.
It must have grown
That's
back.
right.
What's that?
Only a
I
third.
told him only a third,
That's right.
so they're affecting the other 2/3.
no, this is
No,
all
all the
green
grass,
all the green
all the
grass.
grass.
grass is burned up.
So I don't know if it was destroyed and grew back or whatever, but I saw that, and I saw there seemed to be something of an inconsistency there too, but
If you notice grass,
Oh,
when it's hot and dry,
yeah.
it dies, looks like it's dead, and that first little shower started green again.
Yeah.
So it's pretty hard.
I made myself a reference here, just what these creatures are coming out of the pit, reference 2 Peter 2:4, that says, "For if God did not spare angels when they sinned, but cast them into hell and committed them to pits of darkness reserved for judgment." So that has to do with the rebellion of Satan, when a third of the angels were cast out, that they're put in this place. And this could very well be at this time frame that they are released. They're released upon the earth to
And
wreak
they've
their
been
havoc.
there all
Say again?
that long, so they must be mad when they come back.
Yep, like the proverbial wet hornet.
Any comments on the Abaddon, or Abaddon, however you say the name?
Abaddon and Apollyon.
Destruction.
Destroyer.
It means destroyer.
Abaddon means destroyer?
That's
Mhm.
what
That's what the footnote says.
I just heard a preacher on the radio, he was talking about this, that we have two worlds, the world we live in, and then the world of, it says it's all around us, the spirit world. So they may be ganging up with it.
One of the things that's significant about this, I'm going to ask Lindsay to tell us what he's learned about it, but this reveals the name. There's only 4 angels that have been named in all the scriptures, as far as I know. One is
Gabriel.
Gabriel. Who's the other one? Michael the archangel. Who's the third one? Lucifer,
Abaddon.
and this guy,
Abaddon.
Abaddon. Yeah, he's the 4th of the angels that have been named, and he's obviously Lucifer's buddy. Anybody have any additional insights on him? Not somebody you want to invite over
For
to
barbecue.
you, huh?
For barbecue.
For barbecue. Because if he comes, I think there will be a barbecue. Okay.
Are we saying in all of this here, that once we get to heaven, that we're still gonna have a choice and we can be thrown out?
No, I don't think that says that at all. I think what it
Well,
says,
1/3 of the angels you're saying that.
well, we're not angels. We as people, we'll never be angels, and angels will never be us. Angels are other created beings. So, no, when we, and that's another thing we're going to talk about.
Mean I ain't gonna have no wings?
Well, you're not going to be an angel. I mean, yeah, that's pretty obvious to me.
You don't have to worry, you don't have to
Just
worry
kidding.
about it.
Yeah. No, angels are different creatures. God created angels, and then God created mankind. So we're not going to turn into angels. No.
I
So
understand
we'll be in heaven. We'll be heaven. Say
It's gonna
again?
be like
Rules and
Jesus.
trends.
Huh?
When Jesus came back, we're gonna be the same.
We're gonna have glorified bodies. It's gonna be a wonderful thing.
And evidently
The-
crowns.
Rules and trends.
Yeah.
That you won't need a train or a plane to go anywhere.
I don't think so. Whether we'll have wings or not, I don't know. But whatever it is, it's gonna be good. But no, one of the things we're gonna talk about too is the rapture, because if you're a member of the right church, you'll be raptured. That's one and that happens before the tribulation. But we also learn that there are several other raptures that occur, several other circumstances of being caught up,
Upcoming.
and we're gonna talk about those. We've already seen reference to that in chapter 7, verse 14, where John says to one of the elders, he says, "My Lord," he says, "who are these people?" And the elder said, "These are the ones who come out of the great tribulation, and they have washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb." So we know that the church comes out first, but then later on, there are some members of the church who go through a portion of the tribulation, but then they're later caught up into heaven too.
Well, are they caught up into heaven, or are they killed in the tribulation and they go to heaven?
Right, well, okay, that's better stated, because they are the martyrs. They're killed during the tribulation, and then they come up to heaven. That's right, they're in heaven.
Rick,
Yes.
what about when Jesus met that woman at the well that was married 5 times, and he said, "You're not married 5 times," and he said that, to make a long story short, that when she goes to heaven, she will be as the angels. Do you remember a statement like that?
Not specifically, I remember the account of the woman at the well. Jesus says, "Go get your husband." And she says, "I don't have a husband." And Jesus said, "You're right. In fact, you had 5 husbands. The one you're with right now isn't even your husband."
It was during that era
Yeah.
that,
We'll look back at that. We will be, to some extent, as the angels, but we will not be angels. We will be we'll be as the angels, and that will be up in heaven.
Well, the angels, the good ones have, well, the bad ones too, but they know more than us, you know what I mean? As
Right now they do.
far as relationship to God and how it is.
Yeah.
So once, we don't have that relationship with Him, I think,
Yeah.
in my mind, is what it is.
There's a passage in Psalm 2 where David is only says, "What is man that you should give thought to him, or that you would make him even a little higher than the angels?" So it is also said in the scriptures that we will be judging over angels when we get up to heaven. So that's something to study. But we are distinct from the angels. We're not going to become angels. All right. So where do we leave off? Chapter 9, verse 13. Who's going to read next? Nancy?
Then the sixth angel blew his trumpet, and I heard a voice from the four horns of the golden altar before God, saying to the sixth angel who had the trumpet, "Release the four angels who are bound with the great river Euphrates." So the four angels were released, who had been held ready for the hour, the day, the month, and the year, to kill a third of humankind. A number of the troops of cavalry was 200 million. I heard their number. And this was how I saw the horses in my vision. The riders wore breastplates of color of fire and of sapphire and of sulfur. The heads of the horses were like lions' heads, and fire and smoke and sulfur came out of their mouths. By these three plagues a third of humankind was killed, by the fire and smoke and sulfur coming out of their mouths. For the power of the horses is in their mouths and in their tails. Their tails are like serpents, having heads, and with them they inflict harm. The rest of humankind, who were not killed by these plagues, did not repent of the works of their hands, or give up worshiping demons and idols of gold and silver and bronze and stone and wood, which cannot see or hear or walk. And they did not repent of their murders, or their sorceries, or their fornications, or their thefts.
So, again, not a good scene. When the sixth angel sounds his trumpet, he says from before the golden altar in heaven, it says, "Release the four angels who are bound at the great river Euphrates." We know where that is. I don't know what the significance of that is, but we all know that the Garden of Eden was there. So, where it all began, that is the place where the beginning of the end comes as well, or at least a part of it. That's the
Seems
reference to
like
that.
that's where all trouble began.
Yeah, it sure did. Yeah, that's where man first got himself into trouble. You're exactly right about that. And a third of mankind will be killed. So that's going to be.
Was the Garden of Eden,
Say again?
was the Garden of Eden close to there?
Yeah, the Garden of Eden. That's right. In the area of the Tigris and the Euphrates. That's right. Right in that area. And of course, we also know that that's in that the Mesopotamia. That's called the cradle of civilization. That's where human beings first made their appearance. That's right. And also we know that Babylon is there. The Tower of Babel was built there.
And Saddam Hussein was there.
Yeah, that's right. A lot of bad stuff has happened there. Okay, chapter 10. We're going to try to cover a little more ground today than we have before. I'd like to get this done by when? Before the Lord returns. But if we don't, okay. Chapter 10. Who's next? Lindsay?
Then I saw another mighty angel coming down from heaven. He was robed in a cloud with a rainbow. Above his head, his face was like the sun, and his legs were like fiery pillars. He was holding a little scroll which lay open in his hand. He planted his right foot on the sea and his left foot on the land. So does that mean his right leg was longer than his left foot? And he gave a loud shout like the roar of a lion. When he shouted, the voices of the seven thunders spoke. And
I'm sorry, pause right there before you go to verse 4. So this being that we see here is called the strong angel. He comes out of heaven, he's clothed with a cloud, he's got a rainbow on his head, his face shines like the sun, his feet are like pillars of fire, he's got the book or the scroll in his hand, he's got his right foot on the sea and his left on the land. What does that sound like?
The scope of his authority over everything.
Yeah. To me, that sounds like Jesus himself, doesn't it? But he refers to him as the angel. So, I can't imagine an angel having this much power. This may be a vision of Jesus, or it may be a representation of Jesus, but it sure appears to have his power and his glory. And he's holding a book in his hand. When's the last time we heard something about a book? Or the scroll? The scroll. Now, that was kind of the center of it. Remember, one of the first visions is God himself is holding the scroll, and the question is being asked, who can open it? And John wept because nobody was worthy. And who comes forward? Jesus himself takes the scroll, and then what do we know about the scroll? Had 7 seals. Who breaks the 7 seals? Jesus does. Okay. So he's still got the scroll in his hand. That's another reason why I think this is Jesus, because I think this is the same scroll or the same book. Now, what is it? What do we know about this book? What was the scroll? What is written on the scroll? Jesus is coming in the form of the fulfillment of the role of the kinsman redeemer. What is on the book? What is in the book?
Those who were redeemed.
Yeah, well,
Inheritance?
it lists that all that which was lost. Remember,
Yeah.
and remember the role of the kinsman redeemer. He had a positive and a negative. That there were certain things that he did which would be deemed as very good. Boaz was a kinsman redeemer. He redeemed Ruth and Naomi. But also one of the things that the kinsman redeemer did, he was the blood avenger. And if someone had harmed a member of his family, the kinsman redeemer went out and did what? Hunted them down and would kill them unless they got to a sanctuary city. If they made it to a sanctuary city, they'd have to, the blood avenger would have to wait around until there was a trial. But if he was found guilty, it was the blood avenger who carried out the sentence of death. Okay? So understand the dual role of the kinsman redeemer when he comes back. All right, Lindsay, keep reading verse 4.
And when the 7 thunders spoke, I was about to write, but I heard a voice from heaven say, seal up what the 7 thunders have said, and do not write it down. Then the angel I had seen standing on the sea and on the land raised his right hand to heaven, and he swore by him who lives forever and ever, who created the heavens and all that is in them, the earth and all that is in it, and the sea and all that is in it, and said, there will be no more delay. But in the days when the 7th angel is about to sound his trumpet, the mystery of God will be accomplished, just as he announced to his servants, the prophets. Then the voice that I had heard from heaven spoke to me once more. Go, take the scroll that lies open in the hand of the angel, and who is standing on the sea and on the land. So I went to the angel and asked him to give me the little scroll. Notice he didn't say he went and got it, took it out of his hand. He said to me, take it and eat it. It will turn your stomach sour, but in your mouth it will be as sweet as honey. Then I took the little scroll from the angel's hand and ate it. It tasted as sweet as honey in my mouth, but when I had eaten it, my stomach turned sour. Then I was told, you must prophesy about many peoples, nations, languages, and kings.
All right. One of the things that's said about chapter 10, and I think Lindsay mentioned this last time, this appears to be about the midpoint of the tribulation. We're told in several of the books and in here that the tribulation lasts about 7 years. Okay? Somewhere along chapter 10 or 11, we can discern that we're about halfway through it. And there's several signs that we see of that. And we'll talk about them in some more detail, particularly in chapter 11. But one of the things that we see here is what he says, no more delay, or time's up. Signaling, now we're more than halfway through it. We're getting closer to the end.
Does that mean there's no more repenting, and the only ones who are saved are the 144, the ones who are sealed?
We're still on
I don't
there.
know, because the 2 witnesses are about to.
Well, no, but
That's a good question.
I'm not sure that they're not 2 angels, those 2.
If it's the question is, we need to keep that in the back of our minds as we read on. Does this mark the point in time as to which after this point in time, there's no more repentance. There's
Because he
nobody else.
said the time is up.
Yeah, your time is up.
Time is over.
That could very well be. Well, let's see if that, and that's a good point. All right, but before we leave that,
Quick
what?
thing though, seventh angel, 7 is completion.
Yep. That's right. But, so this part is complete when the seventh angel comes. Now, why is the book, when he takes it in his mouth, it's sweet, but when it's in its belly, it's bitter?
Isn't that like sin?
Because it
Because of
contains
the
God's
Moses.
words. It's sweet because it contains God's word.
Yeah.
It's bitter because of the judgments, I
Yeah,
suppose.
that's it. The sweetness and the bitterness. The sweetness is the redemption, right? The bitterness is the judgment.
Well, we always like the forgiveness, we just don't like the consequences.
That's right, that's right. It's like the dual role of the kinsman redeemer. What he did with Ruth was a very sweet thing, right? That's a sweet story. But what happens to, what the blood avenger does, that's a bitter thing. And so, you know, when Christ returns, it's going to be a sweet thing, yeah, but there's going to be some bitterness that goes along with it. And the bitterness is what we're seeing here, this tribulation. Now we get into the two witnesses, these strange characters. Lynn, you want to read that for us, chapter 11?
I was given a reed like a measuring rod, and was told, Go and measure the temple of God and the altar, and count the worshipers there. But exclude the outer court, do not measure it, because it has been given to the Gentiles. They will trample on the holy city for 42 months.
Pause right there just a second. There's something interesting about that I want to pause. All right, this is the 42 months, which is what, 3.5 years. And that suggests that we're 3.5 years into it. There's another 3.5 years to go. But John is given a measuring rod, and he says, rise up and measure the temple of God. So what do we know? At this point in time, the temple has been rebuilt, okay, on earth. And he says, and measure those who worship it. Why would anybody be given the instruction to go measure something?
Either A, you want to know that it's there, and for certain it's there.
Right.
And it's for future reference.
For future reference, that's right. See how it's doing. Does it measure up, if you will? One of the things it said is that you only measure that which you own. There's no reason to measure that which you don't own. And in verse 2 it says, and leave out the court which is outside the temple, and do not measure it, for it has been given to the nations, and they will tread it underfoot. So, something interesting about this, and I heard a guy on the radio talking about this. I've always thought that in the end time during the tribulation, that this structure right here, this dome of the rock, which is on the Temple Mount, which is where the temple, the first temple and the second temple were, that it would be destroyed and the new temple would be built right there. We know what a politically cataclysmic event it would be if anybody would even try to destroy the dome of the rock. But the temple is going to be rebuilt. And what this guy had to say, and I read this in actually in a couple other places too, which I thought was very interesting. It is said that when the temple is rebuilt during the time of the tribulation, sure enough, it'll be on the Temple Mount, but it'll be different. It'll be built at a different place. It'll be built at the spot where the old temple actually was. Now I've got a book that has it's a pretty good compilation of various research that has been done to try to determine where was the temple that was destroyed. Of course, we know that Solomon's temple was destroyed by the Babylonians, and then we know that the rebuilt Zerubbabel's temple, which is added onto by Herod, was destroyed by the Romans in 70 AD, right? It's wiped out. But the Temple Mount remained, which is that elevated structure that's 35 or 40 acres that was built during Herod's time. About 600 to 700 AD, I would say 691 is when the Dome of the Rock was built, and they built it over this rock where supposedly Muhammad ascended on a white horse to heaven. But here's what was interesting. It is said by some, or believed by some, that the new temple that will be built will actually be built a little bit north. This is a view right here of the Temple Mount. I'm standing on Mount of Olives looking down. I think you can see maybe some growth right there. This is from the other direction with the Mount of Olives in the background. Okay, so this would be to the north side, and you see on the Temple Mount here, there's a building right here. It's a little dome. This is called the Dome of the Covenant or something like that. And it is said by some that that's actually the spot where the Ark of the Covenant was inside the Holy of Holies when when Solomon's temple existed and the later temple was. And they're saying that that is where the new temple is going to be built, right there. And part of his proof text is he said that in one of the Jewish writings, and it may have been the Mishnah or one of these other books, it is said that when, of course, you know that a lot of the Levitical laws were given while the children of Israel were over in the wilderness, right? But and one of the things that they had was the ordinance of the red heifer, where the red heifer was slain outside of the camp, and then they burned it, and they took the ashes, and they mixed it with water, and that was a purifying thing. Well, when they get back to the Promised Land, the place that they sacrificed the red heifer was on the high point of the Mount of Olives. And it is said in some of the Jewish writings that when the red heifer is sacrificed on the Mount of Olives, that the priest who's doing that can look down into Jerusalem through the Golden Gate and right into the sanctuary of the temple. And this guy says if you line that up, if you look through, the Golden Gate was roughly right here. So if you're on the top of the mountain, you look through the Golden Gate right into the temple sanctuary, the temple really would be more to the north than where the Dome of the Rock is. And so that's why it's said here that when the temple is built, that John is told, go measure the temple, but don't measure the outer court because that belongs to the nations. That could be that the Dome of the Rock is still standing, okay, at the time. So that would make politically a lot more sense to me, not that we have to make sense out of it, but it would be a cataclysmic event politically if the Dome of the Rock were destroyed, because of course all the Arabs would be up in arms, the Muslims of all over the world would be there. They would much more likely allow another temple to be built here, particularly if it were smaller in scale. Because to me, what this Dome of the Rock represents is that because the Jews abandoned Christ, God has essentially abandoned them, and Satan has taken over. And we know that Islam is the religion of Satan, and this is one of his capitals right here.
Okay, the Golden Gate is the Eastern Gate?
Yeah, right around here.
Okay, so if we're looking through here, is this where the Garden Tomb is?
The Garden Tomb, no, it's on the other side.
Okay.
It's up to the north.
Okay.
We're on top of the mountain. I'm not on the very top of the Mount of Olives, so I'm not saying I'm trying to line it up. If I'd have known that, I'd have tried to line it up a little bit better for you when I took the picture, but I didn't learn about that until after we got back. But see, there are some various other holy sites on the top of the Temple Mount, and nobody really knows where the Temple of the Holy
So they've been food all
You've had enough?
Yeah, they've been food all the way around.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
But the non-believers have been trampling on the temple for 2,000 years.
Yeah, they have. Yeah. And the Jews don't go up there anymore. They just have basically ceded control to the Muslims, which I can't understand. When Israel came in there and they ran everybody else, why they didn't take control of the Temple Mount and say, there will be no more Islam here, I don't know. But again, that kind of tells you that Satan's got a foothold there in Jerusalem, and God is saying, all right, you can hang on to it for a certain amount of time until I come back. Okay, read on. I think we're chapter 11, verse 3.
And I will give power to my 2 witnesses, and they will prophesy for 1,260 days, clothed in sackcloth. These are the 2 olive trees and the 2 lampstands that stand before the Lord of the earth.
Pause right there. This is a fulfillment of the prophecy of Zechariah. In fact, if you look at Zechariah chapter 4. Let's see. Zechariah chapter 4. Let me read it for you. Chapter 4, look at verse 3. And he talks about, well, let me just start from the top. Zechariah chapter 4. Then the angel who was speaking with me returned and roused me as a man who is awakened from his sleep. And he said to me, what do you see? And I said, I see, and behold, a lampstand all of gold, and its bowl on top of it, and its 7 lamps on it with 7 sprouts belonging to each of the lamps which are on top of it. Also 2 olive trees by it, one on the right side of the bowl and the other on its left side. And I said, what are these things? And this is where, let me just read it. So the angel who was speaking with me answered and said to me, do you not know what these things are? I said, no, my Lord. Then he answered and said to me, this is the word of the Lord to Zerubbabel, saying, not by might nor by power, but by my spirit, says the Lord of hosts. And he says, what are you, O great mountain, before Zerubbabel? And then if you look down in verse 11, it says, then I answered and said to him, what are these two olive trees on the right of the lampstand and on its left? Well, what they are is they're a foreshadowing of these two witnesses who come at the end time, the two olive trees. All right, so read on. Verse 5.
If anyone tries to harm them, fire comes from their mouths and devours their enemies. This is how anyone who wants to harm them must die. These men have power to shut up the sky so that it will not rain during the time they are prophesying. And they have the power to turn the waters into blood and to strike the earth with every kind of plague as often as they want.
Pause right there. Who are these two witnesses, or who might they be?
Well,
They're called the olive trees, but who might they be? Who had the power to shut up heaven? Who prayed and it didn't rain for 3.5 years?
Elijah.
Elijah. Also, what do we know about, how did Elijah die?
He didn't.
He didn't.
He was caught up.
Who else didn't die in the Old Testament?
Enoch.
Enoch. Could be Elijah and Enoch. Some say that it could be Elijah and Moses. Why? Because Moses was the one who had the power to call these plagues down. Anyway, we're not told who they are, but to me it sort of makes some sense that two guys who didn't die before have to come back because it's appointed a man to die once, and after that judgment. So if they didn't go through physical death before, maybe this is their time. I'm just speculating. Scripture doesn't tell us that. But read on.
now when they have finished their testimony, the beast that comes up from the abyss will attack them and overpower and kill them. Their bodies will lie in the street of the great city, which is figuratively called Sodom and Egypt, where also their Lord was crucified.
Pause right there. This is what Jackie referred to earlier. The city where their Lord was crucified is what? Jerusalem. At that time, Jerusalem is referred to as Sodom and Egypt. Wow. Can you think of a worse name to call a city than Sodom? So it has apparently become as bad as the United States insofar as homosexuality is concerned. So homosexuality there is so rampant that it's called Sodom. And what about Egypt? Why is it called Egypt? Egypt is used as a metaphor throughout the Old Testament for what? For worldliness, for confidence in the flesh. And if you think about it, there's so many references to it. For example, one of the first, after God made his covenant with Abraham, he decides that God needs a little bit of help, right? And so he and Sarah plot what? We're going to figure out a way to give birth to a son. And who do they rely upon? Egypt. Hagar, who is the Egyptian slave. Okay. As a result of that, what happens? I think as a direct result of that sin with Egypt, with worldliness, well, the most direct thing that happened is that God initiates circumcision. And what do we know that circumcision is? Paul told us, we are the true circumcision who what? Worship in the Spirit of God and glory in Christ Jesus and put no confidence in the flesh. And so circumcision is a rebuke of worldliness or confidence in the flesh. There's two means by which people put confidence in the flesh. One is to put confidence in your own flesh, and the other is to put confidence in the governments of men. All right. Back then, putting confidence in the governments of men meant what? Referring to Egypt. We know that later on, during the time of the divided kingdom, anytime anybody came to attack, whether it was the Syrians or the Assyrians or the Babylonians, what's the first thing that the leaders in Jerusalem said?
We'll go to Egypt.
Yeah, let's go make a treaty with Egypt. We also know that at the time of Jacob, Israel, when there came a famine upon the promised land, where did they go? They went down to Egypt. They relied upon worldliness rather than on God's providence. So that's what this is referred to, that Jerusalem is no longer a spiritual city. It has succumbed to worldliness, reliance on the flesh, which is the opposite of depending upon God. Okay, read on verse 9, Lynn.
For 3.5 days, men from every people, tribe, language, and nation would gaze on their bodies and refuse them burial.
This is a very significant thing too, because what this says is, all right, these guys would, these two prophets would come and they would preach, and their preaching was so powerful that if anybody tried to kill them, these two guys had the power to kill whoever tried to attack them by whatever means the attack happened to be. But when their ministry was finished, then they were killed, all right? And they died, and the leaders at the time wouldn't allow them to be buried. Rather, they laid them in the streets for 3.5 days, and it says that all of the nations of the world saw them. This couldn't have happened before the advent of television. The fact that we now have television will allow all of the nations of the world to see these two dead guys lying there. Okay, that couldn't have happened before, which also tells us that with technology, we're closer to the end times. Read on what else we have here.
The inhabitants of the earth will gloat over them and will celebrate by sending each other gifts, because these two prophets had tormented those who live on the earth.
Can you imagine that? The word of God is so hated that when these two prophets are killed, they basically act like it's Christmas. You know, that's the holiday where we exchange gifts. They're gonna exchange the killing, the death of these two guys for the Christmas holiday. They think it's so wonderful. Read on.
But after the 3.5 days, a breath of life from God entered them, and they stood on their feet, and terror struck those who saw them. Then they heard a loud voice from heaven saying to them, "Come up here." And they went up to heaven in a cloud while their enemies looked on.
Okay, there's a rapture, and that rapture is going to be televised. You know, how great is that going to be? You know, not only did the people of all nations of the earth see it on YouTube and on national TV, on CNN and whatever, but when they come back to life after 3.5 days, everybody's going to know they've been lying around for 3.5 days. They're not only merely dead, they're really most sincerely dead. And then they come back to life, and not only that, they're caught up to heaven. There's a voice from heaven that says, "Come up here," and they are raptured up. Wow. If that doesn't convince you, you know, nothing will. All right, read on.
At that very hour, there was a severe earthquake, and a tenth of the city collapsed. 7,000 people were killed in the earthquake, and the survivors were terrified and gave glory to the God of heaven. The second woe has passed, the third woe is coming soon.
Okay, coming soon. We're going to pause right there. Next time we're going to pick up with chapter 11, verse 15, if there is a next time. That's right.
But you know, we
All right.
ought to say that every Sunday.
What's that?
We ought to say that every Sunday.
If I don't say it, somebody else needs to, if there is a next time.